Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by these great sponsors. Axon started out of a passion for keeping agriculture moving. Imagine having 100 years of tire and wheel knowledge in your back pocket the next time you sell a piece of ag equipment. To find more or become an Axon dealer, please visit axontire.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Valley Transportation. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 or go to valleytransinc.com for all your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. This podcast is also brought to you by Ag Direct. No matter how you buy your ag equipment, from a dealer, auction, or a private party, Ag Direct can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com.
Moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving Iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast Markets with Shawn Hackett. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Axon Tire, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. For more information, go to axontire.com. If you're in the mood for a sweet baseball cap, like I know Shawn is, go to marketing@axontire.com and they'll be sure to get you one. Just send your details to marketing@axontire.com. Make sure the Moving Iron Podcast, make sure you tell them the Moving Iron Podcast sent you, and they'll send that to you in the mail. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 for all your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. And no matter how you buy your farm equipment, whether it's from a dealer, an auction, or a private party, Ag Direct can help you finance it. Go online to apply at agdirect.com and learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com. Shawn is with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida, and he is kind enough to come on a couple times a week to talk about what's going on in the marketplace. So, Shawn, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing super good. Freshly back from Iowa. So
right on there. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. So you were in is it Des Moines? Is that where you went to?
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to kind of see any of the thing going on out there? Did you see a lot of stuff moving around, or were you pretty well stuck in the middle?
It was cold.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where I did travel around, it was just cold and wet. You know, it was just nothing was happening.
Yeah.
Very, it was, quite frank, it was just miserable. Felt like Ireland weather, for goodness sake. It was really not the kind of weather you want to go out and get planting, rocking and rolling. So not much happening, at least when I was there.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, that pretty well indicates what the crop progress report is reporting right now. Crop progress report and condition reports came out yesterday, and I'm looking at them here, kind of what they summed up from last week. So corn, 14% planted, 33% is a 5-year average, and you've got about a 3% emergent rate right now, which 6% is the average. Soybeans are 8% planted, 13% on the average. Spring wheat is 19% planted, 28% on average, and then you got 5% emergence. Winter wheat, 23% headed, 29% average, 27% of that is rated good to excellent. So wheat's still struggling. Last week it was rated at 27% as well. And cotton is 16% planted, and they're ahead of the 5-year average by 1%. So I guess as you take a look at what's going on there, I mean, there's a lot of things happen here in Nebraska. We got, especially my neck of the woods, we got about two inches of moisture, which was greatly needed. We got another chance, I think 2 more chances this week for some rain to come our way. So that's going to be a big deal for us. But if you take a look at what's going on in the heart of the wheat belt in Kansas and in Oklahoma, western Texas and the Texas Panhandle, it's going to be a struggle. They need this rain event. It's supposed to come. They need this rain event to make the wheat. If they did it, they're going to be okay. If they don't get it, well, then.
Well, if the West can get, if the West can get this rain event, if it delivers, it's, you're not going to have a, top end rip roaring crop, but it definitely will take the worst case scenario off the table for the Western KC wheat belt. And we'll see, the models were all blaze of glory over the weekend that was coming. And now they've backed off the rain some. They're still think it's going to come, but maybe not as much. So as anything else, we have to just see what actually happens here. But that'll have a lot to do with whether this correction on Friday in KC wheat, was just a mistake by the market, or was that a permanent weather premium taking off? And then we just have to see how bad is the crop from here. With crop tours and combine results and that sort of thing. So definitely that rain event later this week is extremely important as to whether we put weather premium back on KC wheat or the weather market's over.
Yeah. So. Okay. So on corn, we have our weather delays we're talking about now. I've talked to plenty of people in Iowa and Illinois, friends of mine that have all said, not much is happening here. And obviously, as you see from the crop progress reports, that there's not a lot going on there. Take a look what's going on in Brazil. The second crop corn down there in Safrina, especially where they haven't had any rain for 30 to 50 days, depending on where they're at, is really starting to weigh pretty heavy on that. Consultants have backed off the forecast by 5 million metric tons to 107 million metric tons from that crop. The rest of the area looks pretty decent, but still not going to be enough to make up what they see there as far as crop loss will be, or yield loss will be in that area. So couple that together, Shawn, and some of the stuff we've been talking about is getting to be more little more clear picture, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there is going to be a big warm up in a lot of the Corn Belt areas next week, not this week, and it's been part of our forecast for a long time that once we got beyond early May, we'd finally get the warm up. But we're going to see that, and when you warm up, at least the cold soil temperature issue goes away. You are able to have greater evaporation rates, and there will be the planting there'll be some movement next week. We'll have, now the question is how much versus what's expected, but I mean, we're going to make some progress next week. In terms of corn, we've talked about that the crop production needed to come down. We think the number, based upon what we've already seen, what we think we're going to continue to see for the rest of pollination, we think we're going to come down to 100 million metric tons. We think that's more where the number is going to wind up. Now, by the way, last year was 85. So let's keep this in perspective. It's a big rebound from last year. But last year was a catastrophe. Okay. But it's way down, from the 110, 115 we were supposed to have at a time when the market is hypersensitive over tight ending stocks. That's a feature that keeps the corn market a bit in the corn market for now. So I still feel, Casey, that when you look at the overall planting situation, when you look at the second crop corn in Brazil, and then you look at what exactly is going to happen with the Ukraine corn crop, I think most of all of that will get priced in here by the latter part of May. We can argue what that price is, but whatever it is, I think that's going to set a high watermark for a while. And then we just got to get through the growing season. It's too hot, it's too dry. You get a weather scare, right? Typical side of thing. But I do think, mid-late May, we're going to price it all in. And then the corn market's going to have a hard time making new highs without a really serious weather problem that becomes a crop problem. Of course, every year you get a scare, but we don't believe this is the year for the crop problem. We think it's just a weather scare. You get a couple of weeks of, everyone's worried, and then it goes away and we have good crops. That's what we're expected to see. And so we think this May high could be the high watermark for the year as possible on the corn market. That's been our expectation for a while. And the question now is, what is that number? Is it 9? Is it 8.5? Is it 9.5? Looking at old crop, new crop. I mean, that's what we're going to be trying to hone in on over the next 2 to 3 weeks is what should that price be? So.
Okay. All right. We've talked a little bit about, Southeast Asia in general, and kind of talked about, they've had a pretty decent crop with wheat and with rice over the last couple of years. They've got their bins are full, but there are some reports out there where they're starting to let in a few countries are starting to let in for a short amount of time, just some imports of various grains for animal feed. So they're keeping their stocks obviously for human consumption. So I guess as you read through that, Shawn, what's your take on those situations there?
Well, we've talked about this. Rice is mispriced relative to corn, relative to wheat. Whether as a feed item or whether as a human consumed item, it's as cheap as it's been in 45 years. So when something's too cheap, the demand finds a way to use it. So it's going to use it. So, we all like to think that, China and Vietnam and Thailand and India, they have these perfect, beautiful, gorgeous storage facilities that keep the crop in good shape and keep the supplies in good shape. But of course, that's not the case. There's a lot of rice that spoils or degrades to the point where you really cannot use it for human consumption. And so what the market's now saying is, I don't want to pay $8 corn. I don't want to pay, for all these high feed prices. So but we do have some very cheap, lower quality rice supplies that we can use for feed. And we're going to do that. And so we're seeing that happen. And of course, on the human consumption side, everyone is trying to stockpile as much quality rice as they can because, no one really knows what the accessibility or the availability or what's going to really happen with the wheat market going forward. But at this point, with as cheap as rice is, the demand is going to keep. There's a certain amount, Casey, of available cheap feed quality rice and human quality rice that's available for sale. The market's going to just take it off the market. It's going to take it off. And once it does, this price distortion between rice corn and rice wheat is going to evaporate, and we're going to see rice get back into a normal price relationship. And I don't think it's going to take very long for the demand to just do that. They're not going to let rice stay this cheap. So that's all part of something stuff we've talked about in past podcasts with you, and we've been talking about in our reports that rice is in a demand-driven market right now that has to reprice itself. And then on top of that, but given that rice consumes more fertilizer per acre than any other crop in the world, and without significant application of fertilizer, the yields that Asia has been afforded cannot be achieved. And so there's a big question, how much of the Asian planted acreage is going to get the normal fertilizer applications. I don't have an answer for you, but it's not going to be 100%. It's going to be something considerably less. I think it was the International Rice Foundation came out with a study that suggested that they thought crop production could be down between 10 and 15% on their view of what would be a lower fertilizer usage. I don't know if they're right or wrong, other than to say, I think they're directionally, they're heading in the right direction, even if weather is good. Now, if weather turns sour, as you know, where our view is over the next year to 2 years, we're moving more towards an El Nino pattern, which means more drought in Asia. That we just see a big problem with that. And so I still feel rice is the market to watch in terms of a market that has, in fact, we've started to see Thailand prices spike. And we've started to see Vietnam prices spike just in the last couple of weeks after being flatlined at a low level. So something is starting to change with this low-lying supply and the demand coming forward. So it's the only thing that's been keeping the food crisis from really blowing itself out. So I would continue to keep eyes on the rice market as a real benchmark for when could this the fear over food shortages reach a higher level and reach a more what I would call humanitarian situation. Because humanitarian wise, if rice becomes unavailable or uneconomical, you have half the population is going to start moving into panic mode. So
right. Excuse me. Yeah, you're exactly right. All right, let's talk about cattle and hogs here for just a minute. Let's start with hogs. There is a bit of a slide there that we're seeing with hogs. I guess we'll talk about what you see happening there in this contract month here.
Hog market got absolutely obliterated.
Yeah. I was trying to be nice, Shawn. I was trying to be nice.
No, I mean, let's call for what is it? It got completely annihilated. Yeah. I mean, I think it was down 14 last week for the whole week. I mean, You don't see the hog price down that much, this week got crushed again.
Yeah.
I think the lockdowns in China, which are now past 30 days and are not showing any signs of abatement, I think that's starting to have an impact on the hog market. I think that, the view was, it's going to be just a short-term thing. But now, it's just, there's nothing that's suggesting this is not going to go on for another month. And, we've been adding weights to the hogs because the hogs had a pretty good price rise, became profitable. The hog producer said, okay, I'll even though feed prices are high, I can fatten them up and it still works for me. But I think there's worry that, that this lack of Chinese demand for U.S. pork could be, it could be extended for much longer than the market was anticipating. And we've seen, pork cutouts come down here. This just seems like there's some demand worries coming in, despite the fact that the animal feeding units are still low in the U.S. I just, short term, it seems like the demand fears have kicked the hog market in the chin here. I will say this though, there's the short term and there's the intermediate term. The intermediate term, the hog price in China has finally started to turn up after 8 months being extremely. In fact, it's been 8 months where there's not a single hog producer in China's made any money. It's been that depressed, but we're starting to see the price go up, which is suggesting that the herd liquidation due to African swine fever there is finally subsiding, and that the prices are finally going to get to a point where whoever's left in the hog business in China can now start making some money, which then would mean that the supply of pork is going to start to shrink, which means at some point they will come back for the pork. And remember, I don't think they're going to be shut down forever, Casey.
Right.
They're going to reopen. We can argue, is it, 2 weeks from now? Is it? But I would argue late summer, let's say by August onward, I'm pretty confident they're going to be fully back open again, just as their domestic pork production is going to be falling because of the desire to rebuild the herd again. So there could be a big whipsaw later in the year in the hog price after we get through this demand air pocket that we're in right now. So, there you have it. I mean, it's a situation of short-term demand worries, but I would not lose sight of the fact. I don't think this is a long-term permanent issue. I just think it's a short-term air pocket, but I think we could see some pretty exciting rebound in prices, let's say from the August price contract onward. So.
Gotcha. All right, man. So let's take a look over at the beef complex. Box beef prices have really firmed up here over to this last week, moving in through this week. And as you take a look at what's going on there, we are heading into that grilling season. We're going into that Memorial Day weekend. People getting more outside. Obviously, if you don't know where you're at, the weather may not feel like spring, but it is spring. So I guess as you take a look at that, what's your thoughts there?
The cattle market has been battling bearish headwinds all year. The demand worries that we just talked about, in terms of the slowing economy, the herd liquidation that's been ongoing due to the extension of the Western drought. Although some areas are starting to get some rains, like Nebraska, but I mean, we're starting. But and of course the high feed price. I mean, everything that could go wrong for the cattle market that would lead into a final herd liquidation event has occurred. But yet the demand has still been strong enough that we've had a softening of cattle prices, but it hasn't been a crash. We haven't seen that. It's been a declining market, but we've been able to absorb this very strong herd liquidation. What happens when all these cycles reverse, when the corn market tops out, if we're correct, later this month? What happens if the El Nino continues to develop and we get much, much more rain all out west and the drought kind of eases and the pasture growth kicks in and the hay growth kicks in and all of a sudden the feed price comes down? What happens when China reopens later this year, as we just talked about the hog market, and they print money and they stimulate and they're going to be wanting a whole lot more beef at a time that we're going to be doing everything we can to retain these animals and look to actually rebuild the herd for the first time in 3 years. I think we're setting up for a 13, 14 kind of price cycle for cattle. So as frustrating and as disappointing as the first half of 2022 has been for the cattle producer. He's just can't, every time it looks like he just can't seem to get himself into a really profitable situation. I do think, once again, from that August onward, from all these factors coming together into 2023, we could be looking at a pretty exciting period for the cattle producer to finally get his day to, bring some money back home on the farm. So while the grain business, I kind of think we're looking in the rear view mirror in terms of the best prices, I still think in the livestock sector, we're still looking at the best prices ahead. And, in order to have a healthy ag industry, you need to have both sides make money from time to time.
Right.
You can't have the livestock guys losing money constantly, because at some point you're going to lose your demand. And at some point, the grain guys have had a good go of it. I think it's time to hand the baton off and let the livestock guys have a good go with it. So that's kind of where we feel we are. We're at this point. We're ready to shift gears and give them some of the money towards the livestock producer later this year into 23.
Right on. All right, Shawn, hey, good stuff as usual. Folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what you're doing at Hackett Financial. What's the best way to do that?
Our website is Hackett, HACKETT, advisors.com. Lots and lots of information on there to go over how we look at things with weather, with capital flows, to see if we could be of some value.
Right on. Well, thanks for being on the podcast this morning, Shawn.
Always a pleasure, Casey. And, like I said, I'm really honored to be on your show. And I really think that, you're doing a lot of good for a lot of people. And I think you're beginning to get noticed as such. So congratulations on that. So,
thanks, Shawn. I couldn't have done it without all the stuff you come in there, because in case you haven't figured this out yet, I'm just along for the ride. Guys like you are the ones towing the cart here. So I appreciate the fact of what you're doing there. So I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you find the latest editions for the Moving Iron Podcast. Also go to MovingIronLLC.com for all things Moving Iron related. Moving Iron Summit's coming up here in Nashville, Tennessee, September 6th, 7th, and 8th. That'll be in downtown at the Hilton there downtown, and all the information for that is on the website as well. Make sure you check out my LinkedIn page, Moving Iron Podcast, and also check out the YouTube channel, Moving Iron Podcast. Check that out, and I need some subscribers over there. So if you'd like what I'm doing here, go and subscribe to my channel, and I would greatly appreciate that. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Shawn Hackett. Let's go move some iron, folks. Out. Axon Tire is going to have more tips, tricks, and client advice throughout the year, and in September at the Moving Iron Summit in Nashville. If you're looking to sign up for the event, please head over to MovingIronLLC.com. We hope to see you there. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 or go to valleytransitinc.com for all of your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. And no matter how you buy ag equipment from a dealer, auction, or a private party, AgDirect can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com.
Moving iron in the 21st century.